Greetings, dear viewer. I thought I'd update and record a script I wrote a while ago about the scourge of special snowflakes. It's not a subject I'd normally bother with, but I thought it might sit nicely alongside the video on religion and offence, as there are some shared principles at work. That and the amount of batshit crazy coming out of special snowflakes these days seems to be reaching heights that one would hope would have been kept in check by now. In the interests of time, there will either be no or very few visuals to go with this. After all, who wants to see more clips of so-called young adults throwing their toys out of their prams because my feelings? So feel free to go and fetch a beverage of your choice, sit back and pretend you're listening to the radio or something. Enjoy! So, you know who I mean by special snowflakes, those whiny folk who take offence at anything and everything, whether for themselves or on behalf of others who may not even be present, let alone offended. They act like little more than spoiled brats, demanding that they have their ice cream, despite having done nothing to earn it. Special snowflakes demand your respect, despite having done nothing to earn that either. Recent history repeatedly shows that you don't stop special snowflakes throwing hissy fits by giving them what they want. They'll just demand more. Special snowflakes infantilize themselves as victims, and institutions and organisations that should know better have capitulated instead of telling them to shut up and grow up. We now have things like university campuses with safe spaces, where neurotic young adults can go and play with colouring books to offset the trauma of being exposed to ideas or even just words that might make them feel uncomfortable. Such ideas and works may now also come with trigger warnings, so that the perpetually delicate can fuel their own hysteria about the big scary world that they know nothing about. Universities, as tertiary education, should have a reasonable expectation that students arriving at their gates at the start of the year be able to cope with the course materials and environment around them. What they seem to be getting in increasing numbers are overgrown brats with an overinflated sense of entitlement. But then some universities have also become part of the problem, offering hand-waving courses in so-called social justice, and some even requiring that students take such courses as a barrier to entry to other completely unrelated courses, or as a barrier to attaining a qualification. This is nothing short of a gender-driven blackmail. This might not be so bad if so-called social justice were actually underpinned by anything vaguely resembling academic rigour and evidence, but all that special snowflakes have brought to the table so far is context-free statistics with little or no basis in reality and non-specific claims of oppression at the hands of the bogeyman du jour, together with a selection of buzzwords, mantras and demands. With special snowflakes, words have become so laden with hyperbole that they're often virtually meaningless. Apparently that doesn't matter if you can whip up a storm in a teacup of #outrage. Just try and throw as much mud at those who disagree as possible in the hope that some of it might stick. And if you get really desperate, just call them a racist. Sometimes though it's hard to find reasons to pin extreme labels on others. To alleviate this problem, special snowflakes dialed their victimhood up to 11 and leapt onto the microaggressions bandwagon like it was the last padded cell in the loony bin they so obviously belong in. Anyone who isn't 100% compliant and fawning over just how special snowflakes are is probably guilty of microaggressions. But how do you know? Well, of course that's up to the special snowflakes, and since they are permanently on the hunt for any way to be offended or to claim oppression, another word they don't know the meaning of, microaggressions are just another open-ended way for them to claim offence and attempt to impose on and manipulate others. Unfortunately, what special snowflakes have failed to notice is that their delusion of being empowered is incompatible with them being so easily butthurt. Indeed, for special snowflakes, being empowered has become so dilute a concept that it seems to apply to anyone who is managing to hold off having an emotional meltdown for more than about 5 minutes. And yet, despite being so delicate, so hair-triggered, and so utterly feckless and devoid of integrity, special snowflakes are eroding academia and society to the point where their feelings are more important than facts and even the laws of physics. People who operate in the manner that special snowflakes do should be at the tail end of the queue for those given any power at all, as they are simply incapable of wielding it with any rationality or diplomacy. If you thought Kylo Ren in The Force Awakens acted like a grumpy teenager with anger issues, imagine a political cabinet full of special snowflakes. They also haven't noticed that their requirement for you to tiptoe around avoiding making them feel uncomfortable is incompatible with their self-granted exception when it comes to their overt aggression, label flinging, and organised harassment, such as attempts, successful in some cases, to have people removed from their jobs. You see, it's not okay for you to use everyday speech that might upset a special snowflake through a contrived attempt to misrepresent you, but it is okay for them to use dishonesty and propaganda to actually try and ruin people's lives, because of reasons. Or rather, because of double standards and childish tantrums. By demanding that the world pander to their delicate sensibilities, special snowflakes are the antithesis of intelligent discourse, and if you need a safe space to protect yourself from the fact that reality isn't all buttermilk, waffles and gumdrops, then you're not going to be able to handle an intelligent discourse anyway, because it won't be long before you'll hear something that might trigger you, and then your only recourse will be to start shouting and pretending to be a victim. And if it happened online, you could claim to be a victim of cyber violence. Special snowflakes don't know what violence is either, and apparently have no idea why overinflating any given situation makes them look like melodramatic nutcases. It might not be unfair to blame the growth of political correctness for the current situation. It has grown from people self-censoring lest they offend those who might not even be present, to the rather tragic situation we behold today where some think they have an innate right not to be offended. They have the right to be utterly free, but your thoughts and speech must be controlled, because you might upset them. This has now reached the point where morons are roaming around demanding that free speech must go, unless of course it's theirs. Political correctness got into full swing with things like people getting butthurt about the natural gender in language. Special snowflakes considered that the title chairwoman was somehow a diminutive form of chairman. Job titles were magically demeaning, because of reasons. People now had to think about whether to call a chairwoman a chairman, a chairperson, or simply a chair, all of which made a mockery of the language these buffoons were bastardising. Pretentious job titles became a thing, lest anyone have their feelings hurt by not sounding important enough, and on it went. Heaven forbid if you pondered this amusing state of affairs over a black coffee. You should have asked for a coffee without milk, because the fact that you liked black coffee somehow meant that you disliked black people, and must therefore be trying to be racist by the back door. How sneaky of you. We've had lunatics calling for the Christmas song White Christmas to be banned, because, snow is racist. But since basalt raining from the skies isn't part of Earth's weather patterns, we're kind of stuck with it. Political correctness became a never-ending game of trying to pretend that everything was a euphemism or had sinister undertones. Some were ready to claim sexism if text correctly used he as the indefinite noun. Rather than correct the illiterati, companies and organisations rushed to show how cuddly and caring they were about people's hurt feelings, and changed their documentation to read he/she, despite he being the correct way to indicate a person of unknown gender, just as it is in other languages. E.g., if anyone else wants to vote, he will have to register first. The rush to being all-inclusive and not upsetting anyone who might feel left out didn't work both ways. It wasn't extended to changing all occurrences of she when referring to boats, aircraft and the like to include he. Because, choice of language is only a problem when you're the one who is butthurt by the way the language works. Those who complained due to their inability to use and understand English properly weren't complaining about the genders inherent in French, German and other languages though. A generation has been fueled with the silly notion that everyone's ideas are equally valid unless proven otherwise, yet they magically also don't need to be tested because, the reality of being wrong might be too upsetting for them. There are those out there who seem to think that every university campus or industry should have the demographics of their students or workers in exactly the same proportion as the country as a whole. After all, if it's not an exact match, then someone somewhere must be discriminating. Oh, the oppression. Never mind taking people based on their actual capabilities, merits and suitability. What special snowflakes have consistently failed to realise is that equal opportunities doesn't mean equal likelihood of success regardless of relevant factors. People have equal opportunities to become astronauts, pilots, surgeons. Few are up to the job. That's not discrimination, it's just the way things need to work if we don't want planes crashing every 5 minutes and operations being ballsed up by some dipshit who got the job to balance the demographic quotas. But woe betide any organisation that doesn't employ the right ethnic mix or have exactly half of its workforce as women. Well, at least if it's well paid and clean work. If it's tough, dirty, physical and low paid work, then Special Snowflakes suddenly don't seem quite so concerned about the demographics and equal representation. I'm sure it's just a remarkable coincidence, like when people harp on about the numbers of women in top paid jobs, yet don't utter a peep about the lack of women in mining, rubbish collection, farming and sewer maintenance. The use of hyperbole by Special Snowflakes is a key part of their arsenal. People who are made to feel uncomfortable claim to be the victims of hate speech. So wrapped in cotton wool the Special Snowflakes have been that they seem utterly incapable of coping with reality. You see, you simply must agree with, or at least pander to, everybody. If you don't, you're just in line for someone somewhere trying to rally the next reactionary witch hunt and virtue signalling parade. It is, after all, best to jump on the bandwagon first and ask questions later, or not at all. If you really piss off the Special Snowflakes, and let's face it, that's not hard, they'll gleefully band together to try and ruin people's lives. They think an acceptable response to their utter failure to handle criticism is to engage in the kind of unethical lynch mob tactics that they themselves are not subject to, even in their most vivid delusions of their own victimhood. It's okay to have double standards and conduct yourself in ethically bankrupt ways if you're a Special Snowflake, because reasons. And probably because you have some perceived privilege that the snowflakes think they don't have. You have checked your privilege lately, haven't you? The self-appointed arbiters of privilege have invented shitloads of them to fuel their persecution complexes. A privilege is now any perceived advantage that makes your life easier or better than that of a mentally unstable post-pubescent infant who wants an easy life served and handed over on a platter. No objective criteria or proof of alleged privilege is necessary. It's just another limp rhetorical device to try and bring everyone down to the level of the insecure snowflake. Nobody should have any advantage, unless of course you're a Special Snowflake, where you can play the persecution card in the hope of gaining some unwarranted advantage from it. Special Snowflakes are being allowed to play their victim cards instead of being told that they're not redeemable. There is no good reason why the inability of Special Snowflakes to function in the world should become everyone else's problem. Their hair triggers and their expectation of being treated with respect whilst simultaneously wanting to be treated like babies is their problem. Yet it is becoming everyone else's problem. Social justice is a misnomer. Its proponents want all the perks without having to do all the work. Special Snowflakes also habitually accept no responsibility for their actions, and yet they want power over others to control what they think and what they can say, and they want the erosion of other people's rights, whilst claiming rights that don't actually exist, and claiming to lack rights that they already have. Presumably because fact-checking really isn't their thing. The Mickey-taking phrase, "your rights end where my feelings begin," is how the most absurd proponents of so-called social justice think. They are rapidly causing others to believe in such absurdities. This lunacy needs to stop if basic standards of decency are to be retained in civilization. There is nothing judicial or justified about so-called social justice. It is a movement for the degradation of progress that has been made, and the glorification of people's feelings over reality, and the denial of others' rights. It is the antithesis of rationality. Social justice isn't about justice, it's crypto-fascism. Thanks, as always, for watching, or in this case, listening.